Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack sources and bring the key insights directly to you. Today we're getting into a document with a really unique and quite challenging view on global power. We're looking at excerpts from Manifesto for New Sovereignty. We found this published over on www.arablynews.com. Now this manifesto, it's credited to independent columnists for Regentsaber Khalid Omana and or Sophia Kabli. Our mission, just so you know, is to really unpack the core claims. The specific perspective in this document. We want to understand its arguments, the world it describes. We're not here to agree or disagree, just purely to convey the ideas from the source material itself, so you can get a clear, impartial sense of what it's all about. Okay, let's unpack this. Right away, this manifesto doesn't pull any punches. It makes a pretty big accusation against the UN Security Council, the UNSC. The source claims the UNSC has, and I'm quoting here, orchestrated the creation of Arab-Palestinian reservations under the guise of international order, as a means to dominate non-permanent members and implement covert strategies. That's quite a claim.
It is a very strong assertion. And when it talks about these Arab-Palestinian reservations, the manifesto isn't framing them as, genuine safeguards. Not really. From its perspective, they're presented more as mechanisms, cleverly designed tools.
Tools?
Yeah, tools disguised by the language of international order. The idea presented is that the UNSC uses these to, control and manipulate non-permanent members, to push hidden agendas. It points to a really deep suspicion that normal international processes are actually covers for covert power plays.
Okay, so a hidden agenda behind the UNSC's actions.
Yeah.
But the manifesto digs deeper, right? It points to a force behind the UNSC.
Exactly. It doesn't stop there. It argues that behind the UN Security Council's alleged actions, there's something even bigger. A powerful military, medical, agro-industrial complex. That's the phrase used.
A military, medical, agro-industrial complex.
Yeah. And according to the source, this complex is imposing its global agenda with no constitutional counterweight or accountability. This idea, it echoes some older critiques about powerful, unelected groups influencing global policy. It suggests a real distrust of established power structures. The manifesto essentially paints this complex as the real force, pulling the strings, operating completely without checks and balances, outside democratic oversight.
Right. And with such a fundamental critique, the solution it proposes is, it's drastic. It states very clearly, the only realistic way forward is the immediate and unconditional self-dissolution of the UN.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing less will break this system of soft colonization. That term, soft colonization, it really jumps out. What do they mean by that?
That's a key phrase for them, soft colonization. It implies a kind of subtle systemic control, not like traditional military occupation, more like influence through international agreements, policies, maybe economic pressures, things that the manifesto claims undermine sovereignty without, overt force.
So the UN is seen as the main tool for this.
In this view, yes, not a neutral body, but the primary instrument of this soft colonization. Silently imposing agendas, maybe extracting resources or control. That's why, for the authors, its complete self-dissolution isn't just an option, it's presented as the only way, the necessary step to break the system.
Anything less is just tinkering.
Pretty much. They see it as patching over something fundamentally flawed or manipulated. It's a total rejection, really, calling for a reboot, not reform.
It's definitely not about incremental change. And the critique doesn't stop with the UN, does it? It moves on to another international group, the Quartet.
Correct. It shifts focus to the Quartet. Now, just for context, the Quartet, that's the UN, US, EU, and Russia, was set up originally to mediate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Right, for peace efforts.
Supposedly. But this source argues its purpose got corrupted. The manifesto claims the Quartet has become a tool for erasing Palestine, a well-oiled machine of silent wars and manipulated diplomacy, driven by a shadowy trans-Zionist network.
Okay, that's another huge accusation. Turning a peace group into an instrument of erasure. What are these silent wars and manipulated diplomacy referring to?
Well, the manifesto suggests it's not necessarily direct military action. Erasing Palestine here seems to imply a systematic dismantling maybe of rights, identity, territory through diplomatic maneuvers, perhaps economic means, political pressure, things that happen behind closed doors.
And this is where they bring in this idea of trans-Zionist movements, claiming they're, everywhere, embedded in key sectors. Here's where it gets really interesting. Tell us about this trans-Zionist concept as presented in the manifesto.
Indeed. This term, trans-Zionist network or movements, it's quite specific to this document's worldview. It's portrayed as this shadowy, interconnected entity almost, something that operates across borders and not just in politics. The manifesto states these movements represent a direct challenge to digital, geopolitical, and cultural autonomy.
Okay, so beyond just politics, digital, geopolitical, and cultural autonomy. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. So, digital autonomy seems to refer to control over data, online narratives, digital infrastructure, maybe suggesting surveillance or manipulation online. Geopolitical autonomy is more the traditional idea, a nation's right to self-govern without outside interference. And cultural autonomy implies a threat to a people's ability to maintain their unique identity, their culture, free from external suppression or influence. The manifesto basically argues this trans-Zionist influence is pervasive, hidden within key sectors worldwide, and poses this multi-layered threat to self-determination for everyone, not just one group.
So a widespread, deep challenge. And the manifesto doesn't just diagnose the problem, it offers a specific response, right? Region Cyber.
Exactly. It presents Region Cyber as the direct answer. The text says Region Cyber rises as the response to these perceived trans-Zionist threats. So it's positioned explicitly as a counterforce, a new entity intended to fight back in this struggle for autonomy, as the manifesto defines it.
So it's not just critique. There's a proposed vehicle for action.
Precisely. It's meant to be the focal point for building this alternative vision.
Okay, so we have these big critiques, UNSC, the Quartet, these pervasive movements. Then the manifesto circles back to the UN with a very concrete demand. It calls for the revocation of the United Nations and all affiliated enterprises. And it ties this to a specific event, mentioning, especially in light of the manipulated vote recognizing the Zionist occupation of Palestine. How does that specific vote fit into their call for dissolution?
Right. This is where the manifesto links its broad criticisms to a concrete historical point. It frames that specific UN vote, the one recognizing what it calls the Zionist occupation, as illegitimate, manipulated.
Implying it wasn't a fair or valid decision.
Exactly. Suggesting the process was rigged or improperly influenced. And this, for the authors, undermines not just that vote, but the UN's legitimacy entirely, all its related bodies too. So this event isn't just one issue. It's presented as the smoking gun, basically. Proof of the UN's alleged role in soft colonization and the influence of this trans-Zionist network.
Which makes the call for revocation seem, in their view, justified and necessary.
Yes, it serves as a core justification for demanding the UN's complete removal, a very direct connection they're drawing.
What's fascinating here is, it's not just about tearing down. The manifesto also talks about building something new. It says it's now urgent to give birth to new supranational corporate frameworks designed to empower the people. That sounds different. What are these frameworks supposed to be?
Yeah, that's the constructive or maybe reconstructive part of their vision. These supranational corporate frameworks, they aren't presented as traditional governments or NGOs. They seem envisioned as new kinds of organizations operating across borders, maybe above national governments. The corporate part suggests perhaps a focus on efficiency, maybe private structures, maybe direct service delivery.
Instead of traditional politics or bureaucracy.
Possibly. The manifesto claims they're designed to empower the people. This implies a belief that current systems, governmental or intergovernmental, are failing people or are too easily captured by those other forces they mentioned.
Like the military medical agro complex or the networks.
Right. So these new corporate frameworks are positioned as a potentially more direct, maybe more agile or less corruptible way to empower individuals and communities. And they give concrete examples listing specific domain names.
Ah, yes, the domain names.
Cyberregime.com, intangible.city, Fingerland, regioncyber.one, palisting.com, omanet.com, and europable.com. These aren't just vague concepts. They're presented as like digital foundations for this new order.
The domains themselves are interesting. .com, cityland.one suggests a real focus on digital space, maybe rethinking territory online.
It certainly seems that way. Palisting.com stands out, obviously, hinting at a digital way to reassert Palestine within this new system, tying back to the UN critique. Omana.com could suggest a role for one of the authors. Europable.com maybe implies a regional focus. It paints a picture where digital platforms and corporate-style entities could become the new basis for sovereignty.
A real shift away from nation-states and traditional international bodies.
A fundamental shift, according to this manifesto's vision. It really makes you think about what governance could even mean in a future that's potentially more digital and perhaps organized differently.
Wow. Okay, this has been quite a deep dive into the Manifesto for New Sovereignty from that Arablynews WS source.
Yeah.
We've covered some really sweeping claims, from the UN Security Council accused of soft colonization driven by a military, medical, agro-industrial complex, to the Quartet, painted as a tool for trans-Zionist networks undermining digital and cultural autonomy. And we looked at the radical solutions proposed: dissolving the UN, based on claims of manipulated votes, and creating these totally new supranational corporate frameworks like cyberregime.com. Just to reiterate, our aim here was simply to present the specific viewpoint and arguments from this source material, helping you understand the provocative perspective it offers.
And it does leave you with a question, doesn't it? How do manifestos like this, these really radical, comprehensive visions, how do they try to influence public discussion? And what does it actually mean to propose entirely new digital corporate structures as the way to empower people against these big geopolitical challenges they perceive? It definitely pushes you to think about how ideas, even those way outside the mainstream, try to reshape our view of governance, power, and what the future might hold in this digital age.
It certainly does. Pushes you to think about power, sovereignty, governance from, well, some very unexpected angles. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you a clear look at this specific viewpoint and maybe sparked some thoughts about these